asked to chat about social media strategy. Also wanted to make this just a AMA. So any questions you have, happy to share, answer anything you have. So cool. So let's dive in. Obviously, everything we're doing here, and the word is kind of annoying at this point, but community, kind of everything that happens is kind of built on your community. And that's all Twitter. So I know a lot of you probably are coming from contemporary art backgrounds where it's all Instagram, but everything in the space is Twitter. So kind of how do you make this work? It doesn't really matter the size of your audience. You see a lot of people with just several hundred followers doing all right in the space. But ultimately kind of the goal is, how do you kind of create a sustainable art practice that you can make a living from? And the way to do that is really just leveraging Twitter and avoiding I think a lot of the traps that you see in the space. I think one of the things is avoiding the echo chamber, right? Avoiding bubbles. There's so many. There are a lot of small groups on Twitter, as I'm sure many of you have noticed. There'll be groups of people that interact with each other, but don't really kind of interact outside of their bubble. And it's always kind of, hey, how do I get to know them? Why doesn't this group interact with me? And a lot of times too, you can feel like when you do share work or you're talking about something, you kind of ask like, why isn't this kind of being picked up more broadly? And I think really a lot of it has to do with identifying that, there just are a lot of different, it feels like one big space, but in reality, it's just a lot of tiny bubbles with a lot of different groups of people that interact with each other. So the trick is to kind of figure out where those bubbles are and how to kind of break into them, because ultimately it obviously goes a lot easier if you have a bigger audience for this. And escaping, trying to deconflate the whole thing too helps in many ways. There are the NFT people. We now have all the meme and shitcoin people. They're not necessarily ever going to buy art, and it's you see them talking next to you in the space, but so I know I've wasted a lot of time. Kind of in PFP land, talking to a lot of people, making friends, and people are just built differently. It's extra for people to take that additional step to go actually get into collecting art, which is kind of one step beyond collecting the PFPs. That Soup Yum did a triangle early on in the space that was just highlighted in the Medici minutes. It's a triangle that points downward. At the top of the triangle are PFPs. It's the easiest, most accessible way for many people to get into the space. And I think it's important to understand that the majority of people collecting in the space aren't, and art and collectibles, all of it, aren't really coming from an art background, which is good and bad, right? A lot of the people in the space aren't coming from the contemporary art world. They aren't very familiar with art history. They aren't very familiar with what makes sense in the contemporary world. It's mostly a bunch of people who are kind of newly crypto affluent, so often younger, often skewing finance, kind of buying what they like and taking signals from friends, because without a background in art and so forth, it's really kind of the best way to do it, and try to, while you're figuring this all out. Ultimately, everything filters down to kind of one-on-ones. You'll see a lot of people get into PFPs because they like the community, it makes sense. It's liquid. People can trade it. Then they'll start buying generative art, and eventually, gets to one of one. One of ones are objectively harder for people to buy because there aren't a lot of the metrics that allow other people to value it quite right. And I think a lot of people are aware that they aren't coming from an art history background. They aren't coming from a place where they feel confident in their ability to select art. So it takes a minute. It takes some relationship building. It takes familiarity. It takes other signals. And given the absence of, it's not a complete absence, but it's basically a complete absence of art writers and critics in the space, it becomes difficult for people to assess art. So a lot of it comes down to you being present and creating a network of people that support you and kind of help get the word about your creation out there. And then also, as silly as it sounds, validating it in a way. I mean, the more people that are known and respected in the space, like many of you artists are, the more helpful that is for a lot of these collectors to then actually be able to pull the trigger and acquire your work. So how do you kind of do all of how does this all make sense with Twitter? I think a lot of it just comes down to good social media practices in general. It's you see a lot of people complaining about the algorithm and so forth. You see a lot of people complaining that how it all works. There isn't really any mystery to it. It really just comes down to putting the time into it. But I know a lot of that comes down to, everything has an opportunity cost. Everything comes down to deciding what's more valuable for you to spend your time doing versus something else. As for me, I've been doing digital art for a little over a decade now. I originally got into it in 2012. I got on Twitter. I've been just making physical work before. Got on Twitter, shared a photo of a piece I'd made, and it didn't quite feel right. It just felt a little stilted sharing physical work in a digital format on Twitter. And I also realized that doing oils, it was going to take me a couple months to finish my next piece, and I had nothing else to share. So I made a glitch digital version of it because, I could feel if I made a glitch digital version of the physical pieces, I just doubled my content. But then people like the digital version more than the pictures of the physical. So I got stuck in no man's land making digital art that nobody could buy for about 8 years. But I built up a Twitter following through all that. I fell off Twitter end of 2016 or so and was off it mostly until December of 2020 started coming back. And then I found NFTs with people in February of 2021. But I basically had to start over at that point. Like the few people that had stuck around actively didn't really care about NFTs or what I was doing with the space. So it kind of started not entirely from scratch, but started mostly from scratch. And the idea was that I hate doing things that I don't like doing. Been pretty vocal about that on Twitter. And the way I can make it all work for me was that I actually like talking with artists. So, I'm going to do that. So that's what I did to get started. I spent probably 8 to 10 hours a day back in February, March through about June, just chatting with artists on Twitter. Different artists too. It's easy to get trapped in bubbles, and even, artists have friend groups. there's like the glitch group over here. There's the photographers over here. So it's really important to identify that so you don't get trapped in the bubble or the echo chamber. It's really great if your friends like your art, but it's not really great for you if you're only talking with your group of friends, because it really limits your reach and really limits your ability to find new artists and find new collectors. So I basically spent a ton of time on Twitter just getting to know everybody I could, trying to figure out who the different groups are, trying to figure out who's making what, and just getting to know a bunch of different artists, because your artist friends are always going to be the base of everything. For one, collectors come and go. Two, like, artists understand you more than anybody else, and artists are going to be here by and large a lot longer than everybody else will. So it's a really healthy foundation to build, is to maybe just assess the amount of time spent with artists versus the amount of time spent kind of with everything else. All the PFPs, all the meme stuff, like, it feels popular. It feels like there's a lot of money going into it, but it's not, none of it's sustainable. It's all literally going to zero. And the idea is that, how do you make a living making digital art for the next 15, 20, 30 years? And I think the way to do that is just to build a really strong foundation, ignore a lot of the short-term signals, whether that's pricing, whether that's whatever fad it is. 2023 is the year of the skull. Don't feel the need to hop on any artistic trend because it seems to be doing well on Twitter or selling well. Just stick with exactly what you're doing. Sarah Zucker had a good point about finding your rabbit hole and just going deep into it as you can. Basically that, just get to know as many artists as you can, go as deep down your own rabbit hole as possible, ignore the external signals that will be trying to tell you or trying to convince you to adjust your style or be more amenable to whatever the collector tastes are of the moment. I feel like that's part of the dark side of social media. I think it's very easy to be led off your own artistic path by the signals you get from, our strange space on Twitter. But barring that, really just spend a lot of time getting to know people, build out that space. So when you do share your work, you have several hundred artist friends that you're supporting them, they're supporting you. And then collectors don't want to be found by and large. Basically anything, I've started to get a bunch of stuff at this point. People reach out and say, hey, what do you think about this piece? Or they'll DM me and say, hey, would love to get your opinion on what this looks like. And, I know collector friends get a lot of the same thing. Just like everything is really transparent. Let people find what they like. And the best way to do that is just by being active. And by active, I mean, pretty much every day. Just whatever your opinions are, whatever your art is, works in progress. I mean, whatever you need to do just to have like a consistent stream of maybe 2 to 3 posts per day, just so people will see you and be able to engage with you and get to know you better. Because, we don't have IRL exhibitions. We don't have very many. And unless you're in a major city, there aren't very many opportunities for you to meet people in this space outside of Twitter. And there are very few ways that you can share who you are. And for people to get to know you outside of Twitter. It is what it is. But just, I feel like understanding that helps. Just kind of do it. And as much as grunt worky as that sounds, it's way better than a 9 to 5. If you have to spend 2-3 hours a day doing kind of just being on Twitter, doing work that feels a little mundane, honestly, just maybe keep in mind that, other people have to have regular jobs, and it's still way better than that. But you have to put in the work. That's the thing. You have to put in the work. For assessing just kind of how it's all going, one of the best tools I found to keep myself honest about the amount of work that I'm doing is the Twitter analytics tool, which is at analytics.twitter.com. And what it will do is it gives you all of your statistics. It tells you, right off the bat, how many tweets you made in the last 28 days, how many impressions, visits, mentions. And there's a tab on the top that lets you go into your tweets themselves, and you can take a look at all your individual tweets and see what your engagement rate is. You can see how many impressions it made. The value in that is that you'll start to understand what's working and what's not. And you also start to, if you check it out regularly, you also start to understand, are you being consistent? Could you do more? I'll post things, and then you start to understand what's working and what's not, which will help, shape the direction of your efforts. Because, ultimately, you want to be productive with your time, right? Things have diminishing returns, right? Ideally, just go spend 8 hours in the studio painting, and then somehow it gets sold and I don't have to do anything else, and that'd be fantastic. But it doesn't quite work that way, right? You have to sacrifice studio time for Twitter time, which is no fun. But, sometimes it can be fun if you do it the right way, or at least, acknowledge that it's not a 9 to 5 job. So it's not quite as pulling teeth as it may seem. But anyway, I've been rambling about social media stuff for a minute here. Are there any questions based on what I've said so far? How does this? All right, cool. Espinosa, thank you. So for me, it's not so much about using the analytics to build better things in kind of a robotic way. It's more, I feel like I use it kind of like guardrails. I'll say stuff, and if it's a little too antagonistic, or if it's, I think it's funny, but I look at Twitter and Twitter's like, that's actually not that funny, which happens more than I would like it to. Oh, cool. Thank you for sharing the link. It just helps you understand like what's working and what's not. Plus too, you'll get good feedback too. So maybe you share your work of one format, maybe you share your work in a different format, and the other format works better. Great. Like one thing I found out early on is people like sharing art. People don't necessarily like helping you sell your art. And the way that plays out is, I noticed a big difference in engagement if I shared my art, but it also had the price and the link to the art on it. People would share that less frequently than they would share the art itself. So practically, what seemed to help was just sharing the art with a title, and then in a reply tweet right below that, then have the link. And what happened was people would share the art because it's just the art, and people like sharing art. But people have a little bit more hesitation about, I don't know, helping you shill, to use, I guess, the Spaces terminology. And ultimately, you want people to just see your art. Everything comes together and works if enough people are seeing and appreciating your work, because collectors will see it, your artist friends will see it, and then all of a sudden it just starts working. But obviously it takes a lot to get there. And staying genuine, not being shilly, really seems to help that and helps people help you. And that's ultimately what really works. Because as much as we should be free to do what we want and try to sell our work because we're artists and that's how we make a living, it just seemed to make things seem to go better selling the thing that wasn't being sold. So if you can avoid that, I just anecdotally found it helpful. So I hope that's helpful too. So yeah, I like Twitter analytics a lot. There are some other sites that are helpful for understanding. No, thank you for asking a question in chat. It makes my life a lot easier than talking to a wall of inanimate PFP pictures. Thank you. But there's a couple other things, because it's good to understand where your audiences are as well. So I know by and large, I think I'm in LA, so I get the most engagement on posts between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. On weekdays, not so much on weekends. Pacific. But it's different for everybody. Everybody's audience is different. So everybody's audience is on a different time, like a different space. But for really like A value stuff, i.e. like you're sharing a new piece of art, or you're sharing an opinion that you really think is valid and you want to start a conversation around it, make sure you share that at an optimal time. And like Circle Bloom, I think, is one website that can help you identify where your audience, what time your audience is mainly on. Because you really want your best work to travel farther. And for the off times, there's always random posts and everything else. So it's just a matter of like balancing it out. You just want your best work to be seen by the most people, and you kind of fill the rest of the space. Yeah, exactly. You don't need to pay for it. I think you can just do it with, you can just like log on, and there's a thing on there that says like, tell me about my audience. Like, when is my audience online? That's what you want to see. You can also kind of just intuit it a little bit, just by Twitter analytics, saying like, okay, hey, look, I posted this at this time, I posted this time, what got better engagement? But at the end of the day, that's a little complicated. So yeah, third party to help that, I think is useful. Let's see here. Your thoughts on the value of shilling other artists' work? I love retweeting and sharing others' work, but I'm so, yeah, I have the same concerns. I love sharing other artists' work, but there's a balance. Because if I go to somebody's page, I'm going to go look at their page and scroll down, go to the media tab and scroll down to try to see their art. And it's a little counterproductive if I go to somebody's page and I can't find their work. Love them to death, but sometimes people will share 50 things between their own artwork. So it makes it really tough for me to go to your page and say, okay, let me see what your art is. So I think maybe being a little selective, because we basically, again, like, we share each other's work, and then that's how we kind of all grow. So I think there's just a balance. So you just want to make sure that there probably aren't more than 5 or 6 retweets of other work in between your work and somebody else's. And the other one I notice a lot too is some people love the memes. But when you do the meme responses to other people's posts, it shows up in the media tab. So sometimes I'll go to I think the retweeting and sharing of others' work is one thing. But the one that really gets me is when I go to people's pages and I'm like trying to find their art, and then it's 50 of the same SpongeBob thing for some reason in between work they posted and the next work. And it's just like, I can't keep scrolling through SpongeBob's. Like, I'm just trying to find your art. So just don't do that. But you have to share other artists' work, I think. And I use that not very loosely. I think we're all here because we help each other and kind of lift each other up. And, but back to, you said sharing / shilling. There's a lot of ways you can help other artists besides just sharing the work. But just make it easier for people to share your work by not asking them indirectly to sell your work, right? So it's not like, it's 0.05 ETH. There are 500 editions. It is located on this website, and have a whole sales pitch above the artwork. It makes it, I don't know, it makes it a little more friction to share. And the last thing in the world you want is friction. You want people to be able to share your work as easily as possible, which little incremental changes like that just really increase how far it can actually spread. Right. And then we've got, what are your thoughts on the casino gambling aspect of NFT collecting and how it creeps into crypto art? That's very much what NFT collecting is. Collectibles, totally separate world from art. It feels like it's not, but it really is. Most people don't cross over. There's a few people that do both. I think that the casino gambling aspect of NFT collecting is what brings a lot of these people into the space, and what brings a lot of people, helps a lot of people see that there is value in a JPEG, which is important. Sometimes those people, are in the space long enough and get to know artists and start appreciating art. We have converted very many people who would not have and hadn't had collected art before into art collectors, spending meaningful amounts of money on artist work. So I think it creeps in often. But again, we're here for art. I feel like you can ignore a lot of that. I'm concerned a lot of people too. I don't know. I feel like you see a lot of people playing with mechanics and the gambling elements and burning and all these things with their art to try to trigger collectors, which works. I mean, you see it a lot. You see a lot of people doing these things and making good money doing it. But teach their own though. I feel like if you collect, you're trying to collect collectors as well. And you really want people that are aligned with you, because people that are aligned with you are going to support you in the long term. And I'm kind of obsessed with long term because I want to be around for a while. If you have collectors that really like the mechanics because it feels like a gambling element, cool. As long as that's like aligned with what you want. If that's the type of collector you want, cool, go for it. There's no judgment. Just know that you can't do something like that and then say, why are my collectors flipping my work? Why are they upset that I didn't have another burn thing? Just know what you're getting yourself into. Know who you're partnering with, and just make sure that it's like a group of people that you want to, be around. So otherwise, I know somebody above mentioned, genuine kind of an authenticity above. You're building this all you get to pick and you get to decide kind of the direction it goes. Some directions are easier than others. Like, yes, like, a lot of these things do attract collectors more easily, but just make sure, that it's the type of collector or group of collectors that you want to be around, because again, like, they'll be holding your work for a while, obviously. How do you build a relation with collectors? I think you want to exist in the space in a visible way. Leave that mostly up to you being creative as an artist, but it's not shilling in DMs. Don't do that. That's bad. It's also not hopping on every reply thread, with the collectors. I think there's a balance, I spend probably 80% of my time meeting artists and 20% of my time kind of building collector relationships long term. They just take longer because artists, they're like, you're just making friends. There's no angle. There's no clear path to how am I going to get money from you, because it doesn't exist. So artists are more open to just making friends with you. Collectors, on the other hand, very legitimately have concerns that when people reach out to them, it's because the people reaching out want to get money out of them. And it's kind of like, okay, cool. Nice to meet you. What's your angle? Like, you're straight showing me in DMs. I understand that. Like, so it's a little bit fraught, which is why I feel like the best way to build a relationship with collectors is just slowly and intentionally over several months, over a year. Just don't reply to everything they say, because they'll notice and it's annoying and nobody likes a reply guy. But if they do say something that you do think is interesting, which could indicate that they could be a good fit for you, not just you being a good fit for them, maybe post a meaningful reply and then just kind of chill for like a week before replying again to something they do. Just kind of take it really slow. And then obviously like NFT NYC, NFT Paris, NFC Summit here in Lisbon, all of these events, if you're able to make it, are really, really good for getting to meet people and collectors in the space and in the real world, which is really different as well, because once you meet somebody outside of Twitter, you get so much more information from meeting somebody for 5 minutes than you do talking to them on Twitter for 6 months. Which again, then that retranslates back into your work, right? On Twitter, right? If I know you in real life and I see you on Twitter, it's just very different than if maybe we've known each other even for a long time on Twitter, but it's just very different once you know somebody in the real world. So that's a really good way to build relationships with collectors, as long as you just avoid going to any of the PFP events. That's one thing I don't know, my 2 cents on it. I'm frequently wrong, but I like sharing my 2 cents, is that much better to go to smaller events and get to actually meet the collectors. You don't want people that have crypto money. You want to meet people that are willing and able to spend it on art, if you want to be efficient about how you meet people. And trying to convert the PFP crowd is not a very good way, expenditure of your time. Let's see here. Bidders editions. I think bidders editions can be fun. I think the thing is, all of these things can be fun if they're done well. It's just a matter of how they're executed, like with everything else in the world. So a bidders edition is you do a piece, whoever bids on it gets something, which can be fun, and we've seen them go really well. But again, it's like, if people bid on your piece and expect something because it's bidders edition, if in the future if people bid on your piece and don't get something, it just It's just understanding kind of the dynamic and what it looks like down the road before you just make a choice on what you want to do. So again, no judgment, but just I would just be cognizant of expectations you set when you do different things that people will have for you that may or may not either make you feel obligated to live up to those expectations or may not damage your credibility in their eyes if they feel you set an expectation that you then don't follow through on. Filippo, art threads, absolutely not. Those are all completely worthless engagement farming nonsense. Yeah, no, that does not work in any way. Ooh, crystal ball question. Do you think Twitter will be a place that exists moving forward? I think, knock on wood here, people are always looking for something to talk about. Twitter will be fine. I know there's a lot of anxiety around Twitter, but Twitter has been around for a long time. It's incredibly difficult to set up a network like this, right? Because we all rely on each other. We rely on this. Like displacing that's incredibly hard. So I don't know. Yeah, maybe in the future, but in the near future, no. So I think that Twitter is what everyone has to figure out for the next few years if you want to make a living doing this now. 10 years, who knows? But for the next several years, for sure, Twitter is going to be the spot for this. Value of audio. So I don't do a lot of Twitter Spaces. I like Twitter Spaces. It's I don't know. It's tricky to find the time for me personally. I like it though. I think that really just comes down to connecting with people, and people hearing your voice on Twitter Spaces is better than reading your tweets on Twitter. So I think that's good. I think Twitter Spaces have a lot of bubbles like everything else. So I feel like I wouldn't want to be spending my chatting in the same Twitter space with the same group of people frequently. I feel like you kind of hit a wall in terms of like branching out and new people. But if you're invited to speak on a Twitter space with a new audience, I feel like that's probably a pretty good use of your time. I mean, you're really just it's not about adding 1,000 people that know about you. I think it's really about finding 1, 2, 3 people every day that you now know and you've branched out into their circle. So I think it's helpful to just kind of scale back your expectations of growth and really just focus on like, if I can find like 1, 2, or 3 people a day that I now know and know me in some meaningful way, it will grow very quickly over time. I wouldn't. Yeah, and these Twitter spaces with 1,000 people and all chatting about what's happening to the Pepe coin, like, no, that's not helpful as an artist. There's a difference between what's helpful as an artist and what grows your Twitter following. They are not related. Somebody with a large Twitter following. What about paying for the blue check? I like the blue check because I frequently edit my tweet. I didn't realize how much I would be editing my tweets, but I edit my tweets all the time. Plus, I mean, for a large part, I owe my livelihood to Twitter. So if Twitter needs $8 or $11 or whatever they need a month to support their business, I'm happy to do it. I don't know. I'm not too impressed on the politics of it all and Elon and that doesn't affect me in any real way. I just want to share my art on Twitter. So, how do you get to know your current collectors better? I've met most of my collectors in real life at this point. Um, the thing is you want to find artists that you like, and you want to find collectors that you like. I mean, they ideally will become friends for a very long time. Friends are also less inclined to flip your work, which is great. So when people come to LA, oftentimes I'll go meet with them. We'll go have coffee. We'll go have dinner. I'll see them in Miami. I'll see them in New York. I make a big effort to get to meet all of my people in real life, whether that's artist friends, whether that's collectors. It's just very different. And again, you want people to support you. And when people know you, they're more inclined to support you. So I feel like DMs are great. So if you have some collectors like already and you're not shilling, like DMs are a great way to get to know people better. As long as it's not just you trying to pitch art, just make friends with people. That's really that's really a key element to all of this. Warhol was not a great artist, but he had a really good circle. So I don't really, as for events and groups, again, teach their own. I've seen artists do well with their own discords. I've seen artists do well with Twitter groups. I've been pretty publicly against private groups. I think most people should still do them, but I've just kind of taken a public stance against them because I don't like the idea of these cabals of people deciding things or getting preferential access before kind of the public on Twitter. I don't like when things are walled off from people. I like the inclusivity of the space, and I feel like oftentimes these private groups limit inclusivity and keep people locked out of important things. So that's my 2 cents on it. But I'm not saying so. I don't think it's bad. I don't know. I've just been publicly against it, so I can't do it myself. So back to random things. I think just, again, understanding, I think the analytics is really important. I think being intentional about what time you post things to kind of maximize how far they travel. And I think really, really being critical about your bubble, your friend bubbles, understanding that the same post doing really well with your group of friends is different than your post getting out of your group of friends and reaching new people. And the way to access new bubbles isn't by good content. Most people don't know what good art is. So I feel like that's an important thing to kind of keep in mind. It's like your art won't go further because it's good. It won't sell because it's good. Most people don't know what that even means. So the way to make it work is, again, just having I'm sure at some point we'll actually get some art critics and writers in here to help contextualize the space in a much more meaningful way, which will help. But that's not here yet. And I feel like we're all just dealing with the reality of what we have right now, which is that you just have to leverage the social structure to make this all work at this present moment. Do I think down the road that'll change? Yes, I think give it some time, but I feel like there's a gap between give it some time and make a living. And to make a living, I feel like understanding kind of the social structure and how to make this work is critical to sustain until we get a few more adults in the room. But oh yeah, so as for breaking into how to actually expand in a meaningful way, because it's great if your bubble's sharing your work and they like it. It's great. It's even better if you have a couple bubbles that are sharing your work. And I think the way to do that is just figure out who's friends with who. And you'll do that if you just exist on Twitter. You'll see who replies to whose posts. You can pretty quickly kind of map out in your head, like, oh, these people are all friends. Oh, these people are friends. You'll start to see that these people don't talk to each other. And you'll start, oh, there's the bubbles. I see them now. And the best way to do it is to actually just say, oh, this person's in this bubble. I like their work. I'm going to make friends with this person. Oh, wait, this person over here. I'm going to make friends with this person. And you can do it the more intentionally you can kind of think about this, the less you'll waste your time. Because, I mean, again, like everything really kind of comes at the expense of studio time. So there's a cost to it. And you just want to make sure that you're not wasting your time doing things that aren't necessarily productive. But yeah, identifying who's in whose friend groups is important, because then you can get to know people in different groups. And then, once you know people in a bunch of different groups, they all start sharing your work travels a lot further, more collectors see it. And all of a sudden, you're making a living doing this in a much more significant way. Let's see. Some most successful posts and why do you think they worked? I don't know. I feel like I've always had luck. Just being very opinionated about things. I did an art show in LA a decade ago, and a collector came up to me after the show. This is a traditional world. And I curated it, and he said, "How was the show?" I was like, "Oh, it was good. The artists were all really good. Everyone got along really well. It's nice." He's like, "I don't care about that." I was like, "Oh, interesting. Like, the traditional world doesn't care about drama. They don't care if you're compliant. They don't care if you get along with everybody. People like things that are true, and people like opinions that are different. And I feel like there is pressure to comply and to get along in the space. I'm not saying go start fights with people, but for opinions that you have that may not be the most, I don't know. Yeah, exactly. There's just a lot of self-censorship. Like, if you have an opinion that you think is interesting and real, share it. I wouldn't worry about, oh, that person getting identified or quote blacklisted. I mean, that's not really a thing. And anyone who does, that's not anyone you want to be associated with anyway. So that helps. But yeah, I mean, just share opinions and start conversations, and don't worry about I don't know how to say this right. You don't want to offend people, but if you share an opinion that is inconvenient for them, whatever, have a conversation about it. It's much better to have a dialogue and talk with people than it is to share just boring things that nobody can have a discussion about. Yeah, exactly. You definitely can't be all things to all people. Just, again, like, you have your opinions, like you have your own opinions, just share them, because then people get to know you better. And that's really important. If you're saying things that aren't triggering anybody, if you're not sharing opinions, how does anyone actually get to know you in this space outside of meeting them in real world? So, but people people seem to respond well to, principled posts around art. We're all trying to build this together. We're all very early to the space. We are all, at this primordial era of digital art where there's just a lot of interesting art. And there's a lot of good art. But it's all tied together and people can't even figure out what's what right now. So it's a really good spot to be. I think that we're 10 to 20 years away from true adoption of digital art, mostly because the people in the contemporary art world who determine tastes. It's funny, like it's the only, I can't, if anyone has an example to contradict this, I would love to hear it. But I think the contemporary art world is one of the only industries where the tastemakers are 60 to 80-year-olds. And the thing is if you're 60 to 80, you did not grow up digitally native. I feel like 45 and younger, you grew up with a computer. And if you grew up with a computer, screens have a different relationship with you because you grew up with that. That 45-year-old crew, like, and the 60 to 80-year-old crew, like, if you're 60 to 80, you were fortunate enough to have the resources to buy contemporary art, you've done a lot of traveling, you've done a lot of things, and it all gets a little same after that. And then you start buying art because what else is there? So just wait 10, 20 years for the digitally, like the people that grew up with computers to be in the same position to be buying art. And I think that there's going to be a huge tilt towards digital art. Plus, you just look at the expansion of screens and so forth. Like, like I put a bunch of art up on walls, but I never was able to get the visibility of the same visibility as putting, a political piece up on a giant billboard. So I think there's a very interesting trajectory in our space. And I feel like so much of it right now is just kind of make it through the next 10 years and you'll be in a really good spot. Yeah, exactly. Emily, totally right. Yeah, there is a big overlap between collectors and artists. A lot of collectors are artists, but on the higher end, a lot of collectors are just collectors. So, and it's a little tricky too. You saw this early on with Hen. With Hen, it's artists collecting artists, but no one can really make a living doing it because, the expectations, I buy your work, you buy my work. And like they just kind of keeps traveling around in a giant circle. So everyone sold their work, but nobody's actually able to pull money out to make a living. So cool. Like I love collecting friends' work. I collect a lot of artists' friends' work and a lot of artists collect my work. But what Espinosa said. So there is a lot of value there, but until more artists are doing better, which is what we all want, I feel like the path to making a living is ultimately finding the collectors that will spend a good amount of money on art. Again, just to Emily's question, anecdotally, the vast majority of my collectors come from finance backgrounds. I don't know of any with an engineering background. So yeah, finance backgrounds. So I don't know. There's a lot of, to answer your question, there's a lot of algorithm worship, which is unhealthy. It's fine to take a day off Twitter. Like if you don't want to post something today because you just want to be in your studio, cool, do it. Like don't, like the stress of people thinking that they're going to get punished by the algorithm. Like the algorithm isn't real. Like it's not, it's, if half the people see your post the next day because blah, blah, whatever, it doesn't even matter. there's so much nonsense around all of this, and I feel like that's something that's been driven by all the influencers who I think are a hugely negative influence in the space. Nobody cares about your numbers. Nobody cares about your followers. Nobody cares about how many people saw your post. Like, your friends in your circle will see your work if you share it. And that's all you need. And the more you do it, obviously, the more friends and people you'll get that will see it in the work in the future. But no, don't ever stress like not being on Twitter. I mean, I'm taking like days off at a time of not being on Twitter, and it's fine. You know, you come back, you'll post a couple things, and you'll be right back in it. So, do I think you need to spend a lot of time working on Twitter? Yeah. I mean, you know, like if you want this to be your full-time job, you have to put the time in like it's your full-time job. So yeah, so that's the balance. Yeah, take all the breaks you need. I wouldn't stress that at all. Ignore the algorithm. You're just going to be sharing your work and let it do its thing. But you do have to, I mean, again, like if you want it to be a full-time job, put in the time like it's a full-time job.
Sir, can I ask a question?
We are coming up on the hour here. Okay, so first of all, while any other questions kind of roll through here, I am available on Twitter. If you all ever have any questions, anything at all, always feel free to DM me. My DMs are always open. Always happy to help anybody in the program. So yeah, any whatever it is, just like let me know. No, we did not hear you. Yeah, so always feel free to reach out. Want to be supportive of all of you. And you know, congrats on being in this residency program. There's a lot of people that applied, so. So Anton's question here. All right. See, Anton's still typing something. All right. How to build relationships Many people reach out and say, I like your art, but what then? If someone reaches out and says, hey, I like your art, just say, thank you very much. And that's it. You don't really have to push it forward in that way. If somebody likes your art, that's good. They're following you, they see that. Just acknowledge that they said that they like that, but you don't really need a follow-up to that. I think you can always throw a notification on their account. So when they tweet, you'll get notified and you can start maybe engaging them a little bit more on Twitter itself. So I think you kind of want to play it cool. Just say, someone says something like that, thank you very much, really appreciate that. And then just maybe keep an eye on them on Twitter to engage with them a little bit more there. If they have follow-ups, answer their follow-ups. If they have something particularly interesting, like a background or story or a tweet or something, you can ask about that privately. But a lot of it just comes down to building. Just don't try to sell your work. I don't know, people reduce the value of what you are doing a lot if you try to sell it. Like with anything, if anyone tries to ever sell you anything, you're always like, no, I don't want that. And then it takes a long time to come back around to be like, wait, I actually might want that. But you don't want to put yourself through that whole cycle just by trying to pitch it to somebody. Okay, I think, let's see. I don't think long threads are a turnoff at all. Yeah, I mean, they're not. They don't occupy too much space on the timeline or anything. I think they're perfectly fine. Obviously, just a question of like doing it well or not. But no, absolutely, I don't think there's anything wrong with it at all. I think more the merrier when it comes to sharing opinions and thoughts. All right, it's that time. Thank you all again. Always feel free to reach out. DM's always open. Looking forward to seeing you all on Twitter. Enjoy the rest of your day. And again, pleasure seeing you all this morning.
Thanks, Patrick, for a really great class on social media. And guys, we don't have class tomorrow, but we still have open mic, so make sure you join along for that. Any questions, make sure you reach out to Patrick or drop in the call as well. Thank you, guys.